What you leave behind is what you weave in the heart of others. Control your mind or it will control you.
Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering depends on what you do with that pain. You've given me a death sentence. How can I turn that death sentence into a life sentence? We're all going to die. We know that. That's inevitable. But are we all going to truly live? So many people don't live.
You never know who's listening. You never know who you can inspire with your own actions.
Life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you, that are willing to invest in you, that want to see you succeed. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Find your tribe.
Welcome to Rosabel Unscripted, the podcast where authenticity meets real life stories. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld, and in each episode, I dive into unscripted conversations about personal growth, life challenges, and the experiences that shaped us. From heart-to-heart chats with inspiring guests to raw moments of self-discovery, I am here to share stories that connect us all. Whether you're seeking motivation, healing, or simply a dose of real talk, you are in the right place. So get comfortable, tune in, and join me on this journey of transformation, empowerment, and meaningful conversations. This is Rosabel Unscripted.
Hello, everybody. Today we have an extraordinary guest whose life exemplifies the power of mindset, perseverance, and sustainable excellence. Terry Tucker. Hello, Terry. How are you?
I'm great, Rosabel. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. So before we dive in, I want to share a quick story. A few years ago, I faced a season of self-doubt. I was feeling stuck between motherhood, writing deadlines, and my work schedule. I remember thinking, how do I control my mind before it controls me? That question led me to seek voices who truly live resiliency like you. I'm very thankful for you being here today. Terry, you are an author. You're also a speaker, motivational coach. You have degrees from Citadel and Boston University. You also played in Division I basketball. And
Long time ago.
wow. And then you serve as a SWAT hostage negotiator. You navigated corporate leadership roles in marketing and hospital administration for the past 13 years. But one of the toughest battles that you have, unfortunately, have to deal with is fighting. It's cancer. And then you also had to go through an amputation. So why don't I let you tell us the story yourself? How about that?
Sure. If you look at my resume, Super Bowl went off in the room. It's just all over the place. I'll give you a condensed version. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and went to college at the Citadel on a basketball scholarship, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. After college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I think they did such a great job that I wanted to be part of that. At 37, I made that major pivot in my life and became a police officer. Part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 13 years now, I've been battling this rare form of cancer, this rare form of melanoma. And I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 32 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military at the Space Force.
Wow. What an incredible story you have there. A lot of it. No, not necessarily. I mean, when you said something about your resume going like that, you gotta look you gotta look at mine. It's everywhere too, you know. We learn so much. And So, Terry, you are also the author of a book called Sustainable Excellence and 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, right? But you also are a featured author on Perspective on Cancer Stories and Healing, Hope, and Resiliency. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sustainable excellence was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who'd moved to the area in Denver where my wife and I live, and with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. She got real quiet for a while. Then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help out. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know. So I took some time and I was writing some notes, and eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I've got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be. And the other book, Perspectives on Cancer, I was asked to write the final chapter. It was a compilation of different people's journeys, whether they were caregivers, healthcare providers, or patients who went through cancer. It was a great experience to do both the books.
And talking about your cancer, you mentioned that you never forget what the oncologist said to you. Take us back to that.
2012, I'm a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, have a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. Initially, don't think much of it. As a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. He took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. He did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. He's a friend of mine. The more difficulty he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. Most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, affects the pigment in our skin. Mine has nothing to do with sun exposure. It's a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. Because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. I had the bottom of my foot excised, all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then my oncologist looks at me and said, well, you're probably going to be dead in 2 years. We have nothing to offer you other than surgery. No treatments, no drugs, no therapies that we can offer. We can cut it out. If we can't, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. I thought, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And here it is, almost 13 years later, that I am still around. I am still ticking. I've had some amputations and things like that, but for the most part, I'm in pretty decent shape, other than I also have tumors in my lungs now.
That is a remarkable story. It's unbelievable what you have gone through throughout all this time. But you also, apart from being an author, you're also a speaker, right? Tell me what it's like. I was just picturing, for sure, you're a motivational speaker. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So being 6'8" and an athlete, when I used to walk into a room, everybody would stop and turn and look. Like, oh, tall guy comes into the room. Today, I don't have a left leg and I'm in a wheelchair. The same thing happens when I come into a group, whether I'm going to be speaking or whatever the situation is. People are uncomfortable because I'm in a wheelchair and I don't have a left leg. So I use humor a lot. I do sort of the self-deprecating. I remember when I had my foot amputated first, I was hobbling out of the hospital. There was a woman standing by the exit. You've had that experience where somebody's staring right at you, almost like they're staring right through you. I'm looking around like, is she looking at me? And there was nobody else around. She was staring. When I got up to her, I stopped, turned in her direction. I looked her right in the eye and said, don't worry, it'll grow back. Then I just kept walking. I looked over my shoulder. She had this look on her face like, will it really grow back? Is this kind of like a salamander where you cut off its tail and it grows back and stuff like that? I have to use humor. When I go for my drug therapy for my tumors, my nurses always count on me for dad jokes and things like that. You can be down or depressed, or you can use this in a way to be funny, to be humorous, to cut through the nervousness and the scarcity that people feel when they're around you. It's gone from, you're 6'8" and people look at you, to now you're in a wheelchair and you don't have a left leg and people look at you. It's the same result. Now, what am I going to do to try to put these people at ease?
Absolutely. Terry, you wrote something. Let me read it here. It says, what you leave behind is what you weave in the heart of others. What does it mean?
I guess in one word, it's legacy. What are you leaving behind? I've been asked, how do you want to be remembered? Honestly, Rosabel, I don't. I don't have any interest in being remembered. I won't be remembered. 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember that I was here. But what I would like today, while I'm still alive, is I have those deep connections with other people. And I think social media especially allows us to sort of stay on the surface with people. We don't go deep. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. There's no problem. There's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you get on a bus and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, sit down next to somebody. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Okay. Question 3. Have you always wanted to be a doctor? It doesn't matter what they say. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, or my mom was a doctor, but she died of breast cancer, so I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they tell you, now they're sharing their why, their mission, their purpose in life. And that's where I want to be with people. I want to understand why people do what they do, what's motivated them, what's gotten them to this point in their life. A very curious person. And I've always been that way. Curiosity was very important in that job. I like to know what people think, what makes people tick. And I'll end with this true story. My wife has been in the financial services industry for 40 years. We used to go to the obligatory Christmas parties. It's some restaurant or somebody's house. I used to always say, before we go in, here's the deal. I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues. At the end of the night, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you, where they went to school, how they met their spouse, how many kids they have, what they enjoy, how they spend their time. And then Monday morning, they're going to come to you and tell you what a great guy I am. But they're not going to know anything about me. I would go in and start asking people all these questions. How did you do that? Why did you do that? Where did that come from? How did you make that happen? And people love talking about themselves. But for me, I want to get deep with you. So I'm going to ask you these questions. The reason people felt that I was such a great guy and would come and tell my wife is because I asked them about them. While I did have a tremendous curiosity about it, it was just kind of a game we would play with people she worked with. I wanted to know the information, but I also wanted to see, would these people reciprocate? Would they ask me how I met my spouse, where I went to school, how many kids I have? And almost nobody would reciprocate with those same questions. I used to always tell my daughter, you want to be well-liked, you want to be considered a great conversationalist, just ask people about themselves and be quiet.
Absolutely. And Talking on that, that's one of the reasons I created this podcast. I started by sharing a book that I wrote. It became public in February. Prior to that, I was like, okay, I have this book here about my life, my memoir, some things I've done growing up in Colombia. How do I share this message? It's about courage, having the courage to do the things that you want to do in life, right? And because I'm one of those that think if you wait for people to get to you, it's like you gotta, like you say, you go to, it's that same curiosity that fuels me, my desire to connect with people. And so I created a podcast and it was about sharing the book actually like chapter by chapter. Well, next thing I'm having wonderful people like you like, hey, I got something to tell. Prior to this, I was not so much into social media because I had the same feeling that it was going kind of on the surface. By opening this space to do this podcast, sharing and talking about our lives, it's been a tremendous experience in many ways. And so thank you for sharing because it takes a certain kind of people. Not everybody's willing and open to share, to be vulnerable, let's put it that way. But here's what I think. The more we share, the more we educate others to say, hey, it's okay. It's okay to talk about what's in us. Sometimes people feel like, are they going to judge me? What about this? What about that? So
You do. You're right. I mean, you make a great point. And I think a lot of times people think their life, their message doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to say anything. I had one of my nurses who, well, this was several years ago, a young nurse, about 25 years old, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit where I was being taken care of. And about 6 months later, she's taking care of me by herself. And she comes in and she says, Tara, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you. You know, and Rosabel, what do you say to that? How do you respond to something like that? And I said, well, I hope you decide you want to tell it to me. So she's in and out for the next couple hours and then finally comes in, sits down. She's like, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I was going to quit nursing and go to work for Amazon. And she said, I see what you go through. I see the reactions you have for the medicine you take, but you don't quit. You come back every day, no matter how bad things are. As I was caring for you, I went back and read your story over the years. When I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that, I would have had no idea that my life had such a positive impact on this young lady. I guarantee you that there are people out there watching how you handle your adversity and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think your life, your situation, what you've been through in life doesn't matter. It does. Other people are watching it.
I always say we never know who's listening. We never know who's watching. That is very important. Another thing about me, I always been very talkative, curious little girl. And so again, it's not what happens to us, but what we make with what happens to us. In my case, I've always had this feeling growing up like, oh, well, you talk too much, but that did not stop me totally. Everything has an audience, right? It's just because somebody is not ready to hear your message at a time does not mean that your message lacks value. Your message still has the value. Just have to find the people who is willing. And sometimes even it's just be yourself. Just say what you gotta say. Don't be afraid to get out there because you never know who you can inspire with your story. Also, are you okay if we unpack a little bit of those truths that you talk on your book? The first one really caught, I don't know if it's the first one, but it caught my attention. And I mentioned a little bit about it way at the beginning. Control your mind or it will control you. Someone who's listening right now, perhaps overwhelmed by negative thoughts, what would be a first step to seize control?
What I do, and I think this is a real simple exercise. If you're overwhelmed by something, take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bothering you. Get it all out on a piece of paper. And then look at what you've written down and cross out everything that you have no control over. Whatever's left on that piece of paper is what you can concentrate on. I think where we get into trouble is we try to control so many things that are outside our purview. When I was in college, I went to a military college. One year we had a man by the name of James Stockdale. He retired from the Navy as a rear admiral. But during the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s, he had been a Navy fighter pilot who was shot down on a bombing mission and spent 8 years in captivity in the infamous Hanoi Hilton prisoner of war camp. When he got out, he was awarded our nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor. And I didn't spend a lot of time around him. He was the president of the college. I was just a cadet. But I remember being at an event where somebody asked him, who survived that brutality, that torture, that abuse? He said it wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. The other group that didn't survive were the optimists. These were the people who thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. The people who were able to survive that brutality were the people who understood what they could control, which was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our mind. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy and controlled it. If you're trying to control stuff that you have no way of controlling, it just leads you to that point where I feel so overwhelmed because you're trying to control things that you can't control. Find the things you can control them, let the rest of the stuff go.
Makes sense. It's like living one day at a time because the past is the past, nothing you can do about it. And the future is just that, the future. And so there's another truth. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated.
Our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort. To the brain, the way things are right now, the status quo, it's comfortable, it's familiar, and it should just be left alone. But the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to get better, the only way you're going to improve is if you step outside those comfort zones and do things that make you uncomfortable. We're all going to have pain in our lives. It doesn't have to be cancer pain. It could be as simple as you break up with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or someone else at work gets the promotion that you believe you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Suffering depends on what you do with that pain. Do you use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself and want other people to feel sorry for you? You're going to have pain in your life. Here's one suggestion that I offer, and I try to do every day of my life. Do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. If you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than people who never step outside their comfort zones. So do hard things every day to be able to handle the really hard things when they present themselves.
Absolutely. And I was just about to ask you about resiliency, especially when there's someone out there who's dealing with a terrifying diagnosis. What would you say to someone who's just going through that right now?
Well, I think you have to embrace it. I mean, when I was first diagnosed, and said, hey, you got 2 years to live. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. I went through all the stages that we would associate with grief. First it was, I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. I've exercised, I've eaten right, I've gotten rest, I've reduced stress, I don't abuse alcohol and drugs. So I can't possibly have cancer. And then I got mad. I've done everything right in my life. How can I possibly have cancer? Our daughter was in high school when I was initially diagnosed, and it was, okay, God, please let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. That's a very stressful time for a young woman in her life. And I want to be there as her dad to be able to help her. I got down, I got depressed, I felt sorry for myself. And then I came out the other end and said, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I do not like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability. And that's really what I've been trying to do for the last 13 years. I got to a point where it was like, okay, you've given me a death sentence. How can I turn that death sentence into a life sentence? We're all going to die. We know that. That's inevitable. But are we all going to truly live? So many people don't live. Let me give you a story from a man by the name of Ed Milet, who 2023 USA Today named Entrepreneur of the Year. He talks about the 4 types of people in the world. When I first heard this, I was like, I got to think about this. Is this really true? The first group he talks about are the unmotivated. He said the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life, they don't take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. They're always whining, they're always complaining, they're always making excuses. The second group he talked about were the motivated. It's a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. This low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a very happy and successful life. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people. So if you're an inspirational person, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. Now think about that in your own life. Where are you? Sometimes if I do a talk, depending on the group, I'll tell that story and be like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody ever says, I'm unmotivated. The vast majority of us are unmotivated. We don't even look for our purposeful life, let alone find it and live it. I'd love to be an aspirational person someday, but what are we striving for? Where are we trying to go in our lives? You have to answer that question for yourself.
When I think about my own life, sometimes we might not know at the beginning. I remember when I was like, I have memories since I'm 2 years of age. When I was 4 years of age, I was going through a very difficult time, so many things happening. But something literally told me that this doesn't feel normal. So I felt like, how can a small child can think so deep on these things? And I'm thinking, there's got to be something more through your own life and your own experience. You can become inspirational, a motivator. You now motivate your own self. So you start with yourself, right? And then you go out there to motivate others. It amazes me how sometimes people tell me, like, you inspire me. I'm like, nothing that I've necessarily done. I mean, meaning like to motivate that particular person. They just feel inspired by anything that they might like about whatever I've done. That goes back to you never know who's listening. You never know who you can inspire with your own actions.
And that's what you are, an inspirational person based on the actions you're undertaking in life that other people are observing and saying, hey, I like what she's doing.
Exactly. It also gives you a sense of purpose and love for life, no matter how hard it is.
We're all going to have difficulties in our life. One of our writers back in the 40s by the name of Ernest Hemingway wrote a book called Farewell to Arms. It's a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. There's a line in that book that I absolutely love, and I think about it every day. The line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. Just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it, put it in a cast, and it would heal, that area of the break would be stronger than the rest of your arm. That's a metaphor for life.
Yes.
When we go through these hard things, if we can keep moving forward, we're going to come out stronger and more resilient.
It's like that quote from Nietzsche. I think I said it right. It's what doesn't kill you make you stronger. It's one of my favorites. It's like, okay, this is not going to kill me. It's going to make me a strong person. Is there anything I have not asked you that you're like, oh, I really need to get that out there, or something that you want to say to our listeners that if there is one thing they can take away from this conversation?
Let me offer this piece of advice. We've talked a lot about connections with other people and how important they are in our lives. For you as well, Rosabel,
Yes.
You like those connections. You like going deep with people. And I wish I would have known this when I was younger. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
Find your tribe. Yes, that is such excellent advice. Everything has an audience. And the mistake humans make is we think because we haven't found that tribe, because it does exist. Find your people. And then it just reward you with so many ways. And it's also a give and take experience. You bring something to them, they bring something to you. It's like in community, right? Because we cannot live alone. We cannot flourish alone.
We certainly learned that from COVID. We are
Yes.
much better together than we are when we're isolated.
Absolutely. And now in this day and age, there's so much division in so many ways. We conquer when we are together, not in division. We all have different ideas, but when we come together, we realize that we have a lot more that unite us than anything else. It doesn't matter your creed, your religion, your background, your citizenship, your ethnicity, whatever. To me, it's about having an open mind.
An open mind and an open heart.
Exactly. Well, Terry, thank you so much. Before we go, how can people connect with you?
Sure. So I have a website called Motivational Check. If you want to send me a message, do it at motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. And your motivationalcheck.com. And then you have social media links in there or so on in case.
Yeah, everything's on motivationalcheck.com. All my social media links. You can leave me a message, access the book. It's one-stop shopping.
Yeah, no, that is the way to go today. I used to be like, oh, here, go there. No, just go to www.rosabelzohfeld.com. And then you'll find out there. I also have a blog too. And let me tell you something I've been doing since I decided to have guests on my podcast. I always create a blog article based on our conversations. Not only people listen to it, but then whenever they have a chance to stop, because a lot of times people are just in their car and kind of listening and they're like, oh, but then they can look it up. All the points and things that we have said will be there for them. Well, Terry, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom. You are always welcome to come back. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this episode of Rosabel Unscripted Podcast, here's how you can support our show. Visit www.rosabelzohfeld.com to learn more about my work, subscribe to my newsletter, and get updates on upcoming episodes. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notifications. Your subscription not only motivates me to keep creating, but also helps others discover these conversations. Share this episode with a friend or colleague. I want to invite you, yes, you listening right now, to check out my book, The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream. It is available now on Amazon and also Barnes & Noble. This is a story of resilience, grit, and what it really means to chase your dreams, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you ever face fear, failure, or uncertainty, this book will meet you right there and remind you that courage always has a voice. Just search The Courage to Succeed, A True American Dream by Rosabel Zohfeld on Amazon, or head to the link in the show notes, because your dream is worth it and your courage can take you there.